you are listening to the Kinetic Man Podcast. I'm Stuart.
And I'm David, and we want to walk with you on the journey to living a life defined by uncommon action that is full of purpose, adventure, and meaningful relationships. Our goal is to refine our why while helping you find yours, and together achieve our best and highest purpose. In the end, we'll drive each other to leave the potential life behind and become kinetic men.
What's up, everybody? This is Stu, and before we start this episode, you probably know that we don't really do any type of paid-for advertising on this podcast, but I do have a request. If you have been a listener of this show for a while and you enjoy these episodes and you get value out of it, could you tell somebody else that you think would enjoy the show as well and get value out of these episodes? And maybe even do a screenshot and post an episode that you've enjoyed on your social media platform of choice and tag us. We'd greatly appreciate that. The more people know about this, the more listeners we have, the more we can continue to just provide value to you and our listeners and bring in amazing guests and just have really, really cool conversations. So thanks again. Tell somebody about the podcast. Now go enjoy the show. See you. All right, I'm starting, David. I'm starting this question sequencing.
I mean, we might as well get the dumb questions out of the way.
This is a serious question. This is a serious question.
I'm sure it is.
So I'm going to call you Dr. Dre.
Yeah,
because it's appropriate for this question. My 6-year-old is playing baseball, and we had to choose a walkout song, like a song that he like walks out to get up to bat. And we went round and round and round about which song we're gonna go with. And it was either hip hop, rock. He likes rock. So at first we were going with Vanilla Ice, Ice Ice Baby. But that he
because it's one of the best songs ever sung or recorded or produced.
I don't think I've ever heard any walkout song be to Ice Ice Baby.
Yeah,
I mean,
which is a crime. I think
how awesome that would be, like dun 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 dun, dun, and he's like walking out. This little 6-year-old got his little bat. Anyways, we chose a different song. That's not the question. The question is, what song would you walk out to? I know you had a TEDx talk. I know you walk out on some stages. So, like, is there a certain song that you walk out to? Tell me it's a Dr. Dre song, please.
It is not a Dr. Dre song. I don't actually walk out to songs. I haven't yet. I totally should.
Totally should.
100%.
And it should totally be like I can't remember. I was listening to it on a ride when I was like coaching high school football this past fall, and they were like doing hip hop, and it was like one of those Dr. Dre where it was like, here's Dr. Dre. And then Dr. Dre came in and started rapping, and I recorded it. And I was like, that should be my walkout song. But the first one that popped into my head was Pink, Better Life.
Okay. I like that. That's good.
All right.
That's good.
All right.
I was envisioning like, I can't remember the name of the song, but it's a Dr. Dre song. It's like, it starts with like ring, ding, dong,
keep their heads ringing. It's keep their heads ringing.
Keep their heads ringing. Yeah. Like I could see you walking out on the stage to that. I think that'd be kind of cool.
I should totally start to experiment with that. I have a talk in a few weeks, so maybe I should with a bunch of business people.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
That would be awesome. My question before you introduce yourself is, you are a phenomenal. So you're a doctor that helps family dynamics and children. Stuart is like a child. So do you think in the course of this podcast we could also just really try to maybe help Stu and maybe help me as almost like a dad figure in this business relationship and this podcast co-hosting? I could really use some help because I feel like I fail at home often with my own children, and then at work trying to father Stuart is also very similar. So really it's a yes or no question, not a profound necessarily answer, but yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I think like the one that just popped in my head is something that I learned when I was at Boys Town to work with some of the most antisocial and aggressive teens in the nation. And I had this one client, and they would lie and like embellish their stories all of the time. And so I went to my supervisor and I was like, what am I supposed to do with this? And she's like, this is what I want you to do. She's like, when she's telling a story that you think is actually true, like lean in and be like, oh yeah, give me some more details on that. And then when you think she's completely lying, like just sit back in your seat and be like, so maybe do that with Stu.
I like that. I like that.
Hmm.
Yeah. That's
You see,
that is actually a profound answer because it's interesting that you say that. Like I'm already learning, and on a serious note, with my children, how to interact with them, each of them differently.
Hmm.
I think that just the body language and the communication of leaning in and kind of just using that as a tool for effective communication is that's pretty deep. That was
Yeah.
you answered it in an amazing way to teach me how to handle all these children in my life. So thank you for that. That's
That's
great.
awesome.
That's great.
you're welcome, David. You're welcome. I'm helping you become a better parent.
Yeah, thank you for that. Dr. Dre, tell us about you. You have a phenomenal story and just super excited about today. Stu and I are extremely focused on within the Kinetic Man and in this podcast, just giving resources to help really most of the guys in our mastermind and our so we're just so hyper focused on being the best husbands and fathers that we can possibly be and enabling that or help letting that to enable us to be better in all the areas of our life. And then ultimately, and you talk about it, in your talks and other podcasts you've been on, just the residual effects of a healthy family and the resilience that can be built. And you obviously have a very powerful story and some significant family events that you guys endured and went through. And so, if you don't mind, introduce who Dr. Dre is and some of the magic that you do.
Yeah, so I think my origin story, how I refer to it, is that when I was 11 years old, my brother was murdered by someone who he considered a friend. And you fast forward 2 years, and I'm sitting in a courtroom at the age of 13. I'm sitting between my parents, and part of that process is delivering what's called an impact statement. So going in front of the judge, and there wasn't a jury, but like the judge and the criminal, and talking about how his choices and behaviors impacted your life. So at 13 years old, I stepped into a witness stand and, tried to stare down the murderer, but he looked down because he was not a good person. Um, and try to convey how his choices made impacted my life. And then after I did that, then we recessed for a while, and the judge came in, and I'm sitting between my parents, and the judge looks at us, takes this deep long breath, and then says, I can't sentence this man to death, not because of moral or professional objections against the death penalty, but simply because this guy had a rough life, a childhood full of physical and psychological abuse, criminal behavior, mental illness, substance, problems and drug issues. And so because this guy had a rough childhood, that kind of gave him some kind of pass. I mean, he did serve in prison for 27 years. He was supposed to serve 80, but he got out in 27. So he's been out for close to 2 years now. And from then on, it was like, all right, that never again. Like, what can you mean that, like, because someone has a rough life, that they get to make certain choices or have certain kind of passes? And so I decided to become a clinical child psychologist who specializes in the treatment of antisocial and treating antisocial and aggressive behavior in teenagers and kids, so that just because someone has a rough life doesn't mean that they get a pass and they become murderers later on down the road. So a lot of the time when I'm working with my clients, I see them as that murderer as a child, and I'm on a mission to try to kind of put that child on a good trajectory, a trajectory that's going to lead them to have positive relationships, and be a active, positive member of society and the community, and to raise children in a more positive way.
It's so powerful. Your TEDx talk is awesome. I've watched it multiple times, and I love the mission you're on, and you're doing an amazing job. I'm curious, as David said before, a part of what we're really focused on is just helping men. Specifically, I would say more in the entrepreneur world, and then in veterans. A lot of military
Mm-hmm.
veterans. Um, we're stuck in this identity. You're gone a lot. You're deploying. You work long hours, and you're away from the family a lot. And so we're trying to really focus in on helping those type of men just really get focused on being better husbands, being better dads. And I know there's a stat out there, and I'm going to butcher it, but I think it's like 1 in 4 children live in a single family home, a fatherless home.
Hmm.
And I'm curious what you've seen as far as that stat and how that impacts the children that you're working with. Because I mean, there's a lot of stats, right? And there's a lot of it saying that this is a main reason, not having a father in their life. What have you seen kind of in your work?
Yeah, so I used to be a college professor. I was tenured and promoted, and I resigned, which most people are like, "What? You resigned from a job you couldn't be fired from?" I'm like, "Yeah, like there's more important things to do than, make money for the university." Um, but one of the things that I started to work on before I left the university was exploring what academics call intergenerational transmission of fatherless homes or absent fathers. And so what I proposed to look into or to investigate was whether or not you were a son who was raised in an absent father home, whether or not you're more likely to become an absent father. And for girls, if you were daughters, if your father was an absent father, whether or not you were at an increased likelihood to be attracted to and have children with fathers or, men who are going to become absent fathers. Unfortunately, it wasn't accepted, it wasn't funded, and so I haven't done anything with it. But like I'm on the board of this not-for-profit called the Program Inc. in Toledo, Ohio, where it focuses in on children or specifically boys who are coming from absent father homes, like fatherless homes. And it's just it it wrecks the family just because we know from research that the developmental outcomes between two parent households versus one parent households are like the difference is astronomical. And so it's always better to have two parent households and to have a strong male figure in that child's life. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a dad. It can be an uncle, it can be a grandfather, it can be other folks. Ideally it would be the father, but I think that's a big systemic change that needs to be happening.
Yeah, and I'm curious, I was listening to your story and you grew up in Chicago, father who immigrated from Mexico. So similar, I did not grow up in Chicago, but my dad came from Mexico and
Hmm.
when you started talking about it, I'll be honest, I was a little bit surprised, God rest his soul for my dad, but I was a little bit surprised at the way you characterized the relationship as extremely healthy because of course I was projecting my bias.
Hmm.
And my dad was very, very stereotypical macho Mexican. You don't cry, boy, suck it up. Like you're a man. Dad, I'm seven.
Hmm.
Yeah, you're a man.
Yeah.
You're still a man, so figure it out. Just a very, very. I grew up in a very macho, but not macho like cool, like macho like very womanizing,
Machismo.
5 marriages, like all the
Mm.
stuff, right? The
Yeah.
stereotypes. So I was kind of surprised. I was like, oh man, it sounds like her dad was different than mine, naturally. But I'm
Hmm.
curious, it also got me thinking as me as a father and a Latino and
Hmm.
just how I'm curious that influence because I don't think you talked too much about him, but I'm curious if that influence, your dad's influence specifically, was one of stability and a healthy mentor and model and how that impacted you as the only the only girl
Hmm.
amongst a family of three boys and you. And I'm just curious on not only from the Latin perspective but just as a dad diving into this a little bit more. I think some of us forget the true level of influence and impact that we have on our children's lives and the generational impact that has to not to minimize women, our daughters choosing men that are a lot like us, right? And I'm
Hmm.
just curious from you and your perspective and your family, how that really played out and what that looked like and how we could be more that way.
Yeah, so I think it gets really interesting. So, because my dad was born and raised in Mexico, and he is one of 13 kids. So there was seven boys and five, nope, seven and six girls, seven boys and six girls. And my dad was he was the second oldest son. But he was the first one to immigrate to the States. And so it's very interesting because believe me, we've had these conversations. Typically, like, I can remember one specific time my tia, my tio's wife had just passed away, and so we were at like the get together, the reception. It included lots of tequila, and my cousins and I started having we got into a very intense conversation about the differences of the six or the seven boys in my dad's family and the impact that they had on their own children. Because if you look at it, it can be divided into like some of them were absent fathers who abandoned their children, and those kids, like my cousins who are from those families, did not do nearly as well as the kids that came from the active, engaged fathers. So, like my dad. And the interesting piece is my dad is the patriarch of his whole family. So, like, and my whole family, I have 75 first cousins. They all see my dad as this positive male role model who is the one to aspire to. We jokingly, lovingly call him El Jefe, like the boss, because he has strong opinions, and he'll voice those opinions to you. And he is more on the macho side, but he married my mom, who's full of warm and fuzzies. And I think that balances him out. So he was the one that was like, nothing's ever going to be handed to you. You have to work for everything in your life. And then my mom was like, I always love you, but right now I don't like you. And so it's their balance was amazing, but it's it has always been a thing where it's like, why is my brother Jose a doctor? Why is my brother Fidel a physician assistant? And why do I have a PhD in clinical child psychology? And it's always like, we always come back to it's my dad's work ethic and like his patriarch, his positive patriarchy, I'll say. And then my mom's like loving, nurturing, warm and fuzzies. Um, and I always feel bad for my cousins who had kind of the crappier dads, the absent dads, because they just haven't been as successful.
What would you say to the dad who is there, say physically, right? But just not mentally there, not emotionally there. If you look back maybe at our grandparents and kind of the culture then, it was the man goes off to work all day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe long hours, goes to the factory, goes to the office. The woman stays home and cooks and cleans and makes the home and is there for the kids to raise them. And the dad's role is just to put bread on the table, right? And to make the
Mm-hmm.
money. Um, that obviously is no longer the case, but I feel like a lot of men out there still feel that that's their only role. Um, what would you say to that?
I think I think it's unfortunate because I think we all kind of model with parenting, for better or for worse. We all tend to our foundational understanding of parenting comes from our parents. And so like if we're if a boy's model of his father is like, hey, he goes to work, he makes the money, he comes home, and he doesn't really engage with us very much, like a man who's now a father is more likely to do that. And so you kind of have to change your upbringing, your raising, to realize like, hey, you don't have to, just because that was your model, that doesn't mean that has to be your life. And like, you can be engaging. Like, it's just a matter of like, what do you value? And I always talk about like living a value-based life. Do you want to be the dad who works 55, 60, 65 hours a week, which research shows is not good for anybody? It's not good for the father, it's not good for the kids, it's not good for the family, none of those things. Or do you want to be the dad who works fewer hours and then when they do get home, they're completely engaged with their family and like doing things that bring everybody joy. Because I think a lot of the time people think like it's a drag to have kids. It's only a drag to have kids if you're not having fun with them. Like I love like playing games because I'm uber competitive. So like playing games and like roughhousing. And Stu, I saw your IG post the other day about roughhousing. I
Yeah.
loved it.
Yeah.
But like
Comes straight from the
roughhousing and
book.
having, yeah, like singing and taking the ordinary things and making them fun, because parenting doesn't have to be a drag. It doesn't have to be like, oh my God, I just got done with this work and now I have to go home and be a dad. Like it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to be 100% clear and challenge our listeners even more. If you are that dad, you're choosing to be that dad, right? If your dad modeled that, I mean, my dad modeled being married 5 times, and it would be an
Mhm.
excuse, right? It'd be an excuse to go get married 5 times. And that just sounds horrible. I'm not gonna lie. That sounds terrible. But it's interesting because we allow ourselves to I do believe there's a huge power of influence, and we need to remember that, but we also have the ability to break chains, right? Like even last night was we talk about it all the time, and I often struggle, but my daughter, there were some friends over, my son had a friend over, and then my daughter was like, well, I want friends over. I'm like, okay, whatever. And then she's like, well, I want to go eat at their house. And I was like, you know what, I went and got food to make for you because you wanted this thing, and now it's very inconsiderate. And then but I totally, like, I had to stop and be like, why don't I just have all these kids eat at my house, like have all of them. I was like, because I always talk about wanting to have a honeypot house, right, where
Mhm.
kids just flock. And it was awesome. As soon as I made that decision, I got excited. It was
Mhm.
super fun. There were like 4 extra kids, 3 extra kids that were came over. They all had fun. And then I went outside in the front yard, and there ended up being like 11 kids just from somewhere that were
Yeah.
all playing basketball in front of our house. And I was like, this is the dream, and this
Mhm.
is the power of intentionality as a dad. Just say yes to things if you truly want to see that come to fruition, right? And so I love how
Mhm.
you say that, because I don't want to give anybody excuses. Like anybody could do it. And I was
Yeah.
grilling hamburgers. Anybody can grill hamburgers, right?
Right.
So I think there's a lot of power in that. One thing, as I think about all these kids and the influence you have, and you mentioned it earlier, it doesn't have to be a dad. Stu and I are both have gotten really into coaching, and what I see a lot is there's these boys from broken homes. I
Yeah.
coach tackle football, and so there's these boys from broken homes, and man, it is it's very sad to see just how they typically struggle in school. They struggle with respect. They struggle with the way they treat their mothers. Um, and one thing that I'm battling is this nurture versus nature idea. And
Mhm.
I'm curious on your thoughts on nurture versus nature, because sometimes I have to, like, I think a lot of these kids, particularly the boys in school, are kind of tucked away and they're like, no, it's just their nature. They're just bad kids. And I'm really trying to be a dude who's an influence in their lives, especially if they don't have a dad. And even if they do, just to be a positive influence, be like, no, man, you're a good kid. Like,
Mhm.
let's figure out how to do this. So I'm curious on this nurture versus nature idea, and your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I talk about it in my TEDx talk and I crack the joke that either way it's your parents' fault. But then I say like I'm much more strongly on the nurture side. Like, and I have this conversation with my clients all the time, like when we talk about medication and those kind of things, and the reason why I became a psychologist and not a psychiatrist. Like I don't want to prescribe kids medicine. I don't want to prescribe teenagers medicine. And I think whatever your biology is, that's what your biology is. It's going to kind of put you in certain ranges, but that doesn't mean that like you're a lost cause, that there's no hope for you. Like you can be an agent in your own life and you can better yourself. So like David, I don't know if you know, but I'm a high school football coach. And I remember, and when you were talking, this young man came popped into my head. So it was, let's see, fall of 2022, and I'm on the sidelines with my team. And one of our linebackers, he's like physically like just what you want in a linebacker. And he like loses it and he starts going off on the ref. And so our head coach like kicks him off the field, says like, go to the locker room. You're done for the game. And so they're like, hey, go see, because then we kicked out someone else too because they were just being obnoxious. And so they're like, Dre, like, go to the locker room and figure out what the heck's going on. So like I spent the rest of the time in the locker room with these two athletes, and then I started working with this one in particular, and the one like the linebacker who's just, and he has a pretty traumatic, like, originally from Samoa, like adopted, but has never, like, has kind of been labeled like the, kind of like the intense bad kid, those kind of things. And I remember I was at Cedar Point, which is like this huge amusement park, this past summer. My husband and I were there together, and it's a Wednesday night, and my football team is at camp, but I'm at the amusement park, and I'm about to ride this huge roller coaster called Millennium Force. It's my husband's favorite. It has like a 300-foot drop, and I just checked my phone because we're waiting in line, and I have a text message from my head coach, and it was like, all caps, so and so like slipped. We need to talk ASAP. And so I was like about to jump on the Millennium Force. I'll call you in 10 minutes. And so I call them, and they were doing a scrimmage at camp, and the kid lost it, and he literally picked up his opponent by his neck, lifted him into the air, slammed him down on the ground, and just started wailing. And it took one of our other linebackers to pull him off. Our head coach like grabbed him by the face mask and started screaming, and then it was like over. So then I met with him like 2 days later, because they sent him home, because you can't have that. They sent him home 2 days later, and so I met with him, and it turned out like he was just triggered because of stuff from his past. And so then, and he doesn't remember anything from like being tugged on to like the coach, like he just completely blacked out. And so then we worked with him. I like worked with him and worked with him and worked with him. And every single game this past season, everyone was like, "Oh my God, he's had so much growth. He's so different." Like, we were all like, oh crap, he's gonna lose it. And then it was like, no, he didn't lose it. And then I remember like at our banquet, he came up to me and gave me this huge hug, and he's like, you've been the most influential person in my life. Because it was like, no, that's, and I remember having that conversation with him, and I was like, look, we can't have you blacking out, because like it's not even for football. It's like, I don't want you to lose your mind, black out, and hurt your future wife. And he's like, that would never happen, Dr. Mata. And I was like, but it can. And I'm like, so we're going to work with you to figure out like, and so we did it. Like, we started, I was like, okay, from now on, like every single practice, people need to be like triggering him so that he can learn emotion regulation. But yeah, it was amazing to kind of see that change in him, because just because that's your past doesn't mean that has to be your present or your future.
Reminds me of a chapter in your book about ratios, the 5-to-1 ratio.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reading that and thinking to myself, and I want you to explain it in just a second. But so I have a 6-year-old son, very headstrong, very independent, like
Mm-hmm.
wants to do everything himself.
Mm-hmm.
And I find myself and my wife as well, like we find ourselves just telling him no all the time,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like no, don't do this, don't do that, stop it. Like all it's all negative. And
Mm-hmm.
then reading that chapter, it like really changed my perspective on just changing that ratio a little bit. And just recently we've started to do that a little bit more. And we're actually taking a love and logic class. I don't know if you've heard of that, but really
Mm-hmm.
good. And one of the instructors said something like, "Hey, just tell your kid that you're noticing him more, right? Just for random
Mm-hmm.
stuff."
Yep.
And the other night he like held the door open for some people coming in the door, and they're just like, hey buddy, hey, I noticed you held the door
Mm-hmm.
for your friends. That was really awesome. Nice work, buddy. I'm proud of you. And his face just lit up, and his shoulders came back a little bit, and like just was like
Mm-hmm.
demeanor totally changed. And so it's just really just that little thing, right? It was just really really big. And so if you could just explain that, this 5-to-1 ratio in your parenting book.
Yeah, so the 5-to-1 ratio is stolen from, I'll admit it, it's stolen from John Gottman, who's like a leading expert in marriage. And his his kind of claim to fame is that he can watch a couple for 5 minutes and he can predict with like a 94% accuracy whether or not that couple will get a divorce. And it's all because of his 5-to-1 ratio and how they're interacting. And so what it is it's for every five there you should maintain 5 positive interactions for every 1 negative interaction. And couples that get a divorce, their ratio is skewed much more towards the negative side. And the couples that have this 5-to-1 ratio, they tend to be protected against divorce. And so it's something that I've stolen when I work with sports and coaches, and it's something that I use with parenting. And so it's like having that 5 positive interactions to every 1 negative interaction. It tends to be like it's just easier, like to be more positive to, and especially like if you're noticing that your kids are a little bit more grumbly, a lot of the time I say like, hey, what's your rate, like your ratio's probably off, let's up the number of positive interactions. And it's not like, it's not ingenuine, it's not like, oh, I'm gonna like give them, all these things. You don't have to give them all these things. It's similar to what you said, Stu, like this catch and ignore that's in the book of like you're gonna catch them being good and doing behaviors that warm your heart, and you're going to ignore all the negative stuff that grinds your gears for at least a week, and then see what happens to their behavior just by doing that.
Yeah, it's super powerful. Stu, I would also highly recommend. I don't think it's limited to marriage or parenting. I think you could probably be a little bit more 5-to-1 in our relationship as well. Just a
Oh, you
tip.
think so?
Yeah, just something that maybe you could be conscious of. But um,
I mean,
you
maybe
know,
just don't suck as much, and like
yeah, no. See, there you go. Negative.
Mm-hmm.
Immediately, right? Dr. Dre, you got my back. Immediately
I do.
negative. Yeah.
Except this is totally banter that's appropriate for boys and men.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
No,
I'm
it's
not gonna
good.
like take this away because this is like
No.
relationship affiliative, not like aggressive.
No, it's true. I mean, I kind of hate Stu, but I mean, outside of
no, you don't.
that, there's some really positive growth in that.
Mm-hmm.
And just as a side note, my wife played women's professional football, so I come from a women heavy football. She used to ref high school games as well, which
Yeah.
was when she was doing it was kind of it was a very new thing to see a
Mm-hmm.
woman on the field. And women are the meanest. Actually, the moms were the meanest to a woman ref. It was crazy, like really mean. But anyways, not important. That's
Yeah.
for another
That's
topic.
a different conversation because I remember it was not this past season, but the season before. So I'm the only woman. I'm the only woman on the sideline, and there was a mom that had a problem with it.
Yeah.
Like, why is this clinical child psychologist on the sidelines? And we're like, really? Like
I'd be
anyone?
like stoked. I'd be like, dude, can you talk
Yeah.
to my kid? Can you please talk to my kid?
And then we like figured out how to like bring her in, and now she's fine. She like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating the things that we get wrapped around and I think, when you all joking aside, so one thing I do want to acknowledge, the fact that you almost brought me to tears when I'm picturing this big Samoan kid saying that you're the most influential person in my life, right? And that really highlights the power, I believe, not only of your profession, but it's coaching. It's being
Mm-hmm.
there and being present and being somebody that speaks into, like, does not marginalize, that does not
Right.
put that kid in a box and
Mm-hmm.
says, hey, dude, you can be different, you can grow. So I love that. I want to acknowledge you in that. I'm just curious, how do we as parents proactively, I know there's the 5-to-1, but how would you recommend that we proactively get ahead of some of this? Because there is as you said, there's nature versus nurture, but kids are different, right? Like kids in my household are vastly different, and they're same
Yeah.
parents, just very different kids. How can you proactively work towards, a healthy, what would be defined as a healthy relationship, healthy family? Because, we have such limited time with these kids and then they're gone, right? And we have this
Mm-hmm.
time to influence them. And I'm just curious, how do you maximize that?
I think you first thing is you put the cell phones down, right? Screens,
Amen.
like they
Amen.
go away, and like you breathe into family time. So like one of the biggest ones that I will preach until the day I die is like family dinners. Like having consistent family positive dinners where like personalities can shine and you're like having conversations and you're engaging and you're having fun, like the developmental outcomes associated with that alone is huge. um I think the other thing is like being cognizant of how much extracurricular activities we're registering our kids for. So like my recommendation is when they're before like junior high, they do one activity at a time, and that is it. Because other than that, you're just running your child around to this sport, to this sport, to this activity, to this activity, and like it doesn't work out well. It burns you out, it burns them out. There's no time for families, those kind of things. And I think you're extremely, you guys have mentioned it before, like you're intentional with your time. And then when you mentioned the different personalities, you get to know your kids as them. So like I will typically do like date nights with each of my kids individually. They get to choose where we go or what we do, and they get to choose their restaurant. So have I been to Waffle House way too many times? Yes. But like two of my kids absolutely love Waffle House. And so or Outback or Cocina de Carlos is like the top three for the kids, or Frickers, which is like a sports bar place. But like you let them choose and you are completely engaged, and they know like it's their turn for a date and they get to choose and they get to have control, and you just kind of, you know, relate to them in that way. And it's not like, oh my God, you're choosing Waffle House again. It's like, yes, we get to
Uh,
go to Waffle
I
House.
see a lot of Noodles and Company in my
Noodles and
future,
Company,
and
dude.
they're not, that place is like my least favorite ever.
I really, I
Oh yeah.
love Noodles and Company. We don't have one in like
Ugh.
nearby.
That's why
Get
you
the
love it.
chicken,
That's why you
get
love
the
it.
chicken pesto cavatappi. It's so good.
Yeah,
After
I'll
after
try
your
it.
100th noodle as a company,
We'll
in
try it.
in the span of a year, like it's.
Five Guys and Noodles and Company. Got it. I got to up my workout plan.
Hey, on your website, you have a very simple little saying at the bottom, and I really like it, and I'm hoping to understand it a little bit better. What does it mean to build your fortress?
hmm So I came up with this idea. I was actually talking with my friend on his podcast, Jay Lee. He's a previous, he was in the Navy, and he was like a bomb squad dude, um, who jumps out of perfectly good airplanes, which I will not understand. But so we were on his podcast and I was prepping for it. And my husband and I came up with this phrase of like, build your fortress. And so what it is, it's like a three-sided fortress, and it's individual coping skills, relationship skills, and parenting skills. And if you can continue to figure out which one of those sides of your fortress is like the least strong or the shortest side, you can always develop more skills. That's what I love about skills, is like you could there's always more that you can learn. And then I mentioned it in my TEDx talk, like once you build your fortress high enough, like it's smooth sailing, and that lots of things tend to like not impact you. And so COVID did not impact my husband and I and our family at all. Not financially, not family wise, not job wise, not emotionally, not mentally, just because we were financially stable. We had a good marriage, or we have a good marriage. Not, it didn't, we were strong parents. And so we could be with our children all of the time, and that would be okay. Like we got stronger from it because we were able to have that connection. And so I talk about like just building those skills as high as you possibly can, and each person kind of have their own little fortress, not little fortress, but and then mentally you tend to have a higher quality life.
Which is huge. It's very practical, and I think breaking it down, because one of the things, and Stu, I don't remember the book. One of our favorite books is Coddling of the American Mind, and they just came out with another book,
Yep.
Anxious
talking
generation.
about anxious
Yep.
generation, right? And the resiliency. I mean, you see it all around. It's just faltering, and
hmm
excuse me. And I think a lot of that is one. I think it's screens. Not. I think the data is showing. screens, but also just this lack of intentionality in building relationships, which is really it's sad to see, but I think the most sad part of it, and to your point, is you can do something about it, right? We can do something
Mm-hmm.
about it as parents. We can teach these lessons, and there's a lot of things that we can do that's in our power. I want to jump real quick. Tell us about. So I love the title. Like just looking at the title of your book, told me, man, she's funny. Dr. Dre's funny, right? The number two parenting book. And I just love, if you don't mind, just talk about your book a little bit, help our listeners know, one, what it's about, and two, where they can get it.
Mm-hmm. So the whole premise of the book is practical parenting tips and the time it takes you to poop. A mom poop, not a dad poop, because those are significantly different.
I was gonna say, this sounds like I got plenty of time.
Well, I
Hey, I'm
joke
not
in the
gonna
book.
lie. I'm not gonna lie. I've read a few chapters while, doing my deed.
Exactly. It was funny. I was at an event 2 weeks ago, and I like was talking to two women about it, and they were like, and I cracked the joke about like mom poop, not a dad poop, and they're like, "Wait, dads take longer in the bathroom than moms?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Not in our family."
Oh,
And so like
wow.
apparently I met the only two moms in the world
In the
who take
world.
in the world who take a shorter amount of time or take a longer amount of time than their husbands. Um and so like when I kind of started writing it, like parents want to know what to do. They don't want the developmental theories. They don't want all of the research. They don't care. They simply want to know how can they manage their child's behavior and how can they have a good relationship and how can they not lose their mind doing it. And so it was like, okay, can I come up with fun way, like practical ways told in, everyone loves a good story. When I was a professor, my students used to say, like, if I taught a class just telling stories, they would take it. And so each chapter, there's 29 in total, is broken down. And there's a real life story that has happened either to me or clients or friends. And then there's a practical tip. And then because everyone likes like where are they now, there's like a where are they now section to kind of update where the people in the story are. But yeah, so they can buy it on Amazon. It's called the number two parenting book, Practical Tips for the Pooped Out Parent. I originally wanted the pooping parent, but I was overruled.
Who overruled that?
Well, my husband, when I told him, he's like, I don't like that title at all. And
Oh,
I
I
was
love that
like,
title.
he was like, when you go on, like, he's like, if you ever go on, like, Good Morning America, the Today Show, they're going to be like, the pooping parent. And then people are going to get an image of you, like, pooping. And I'm like, and then a few days later, he was like, that's a brilliant title. And I was like,
That's what I'm
I
saying.
know. And then
Because
we
nobody's
put
gonna
it
think
out
about
there.
you. They're gonna think about themselves. They're gonna think about themselves pooping, and then you're probably gonna sell like
Yes.
billions of books to dudes. Moms might be slow on the uptake.
And so, but then I like put it out there. I polled lots of people. I'm like the number two parenting book or the pooping parent, and the number two parenting book ran or won out. But it's funny because people are like, "Oh, so this is your second book," and I'm like, "No,
Yeah,
this is
that's
my
funny.
first book."
Yeah. Well,
But
when
yeah.
I first saw it, I was thinking the irony of everybody's parenting book is like the top parenting book, the top parenting book. So my first thought
Hmm.
was not number two poop. It was, I mean, obviously you get to that with the toilet paper on the cover, but
Yeah.
it was the number two as in like at the second after the all these number top tier ones. So
Right.
there's lots of interpret. But I thought that was funny too. Like you
Hmm.
created a title open for interpretation, funny in each interpretation. So congratulations to you on that one.
Thank
I
you.
love I love the
Poop the
little
poop.
the poop with the little toilet paper, and then like in the book there's like these little like guys with like toilet papers as their heads. It's pretty rad.
Stu, did you get my most recent package?
I've not. I was wondering why you were asking for my address, but I can't
Hmm.
wait because just this alone, this little bookmark with the poop and toilet paper is my kid. Like you are by far my kid's favorite author now because of this little bookmark.
Yep. There's a package coming your way. They're gonna love it.
Oh man, I cannot
Hmm.
wait.
See, I need to start booking our podcast so that I can be the recipient of these.
Now,
That's why you do it. That's why you
that's
do
why I
it.
do
Just
it.
send me your address and I'll send you some Coop the Poop bookmarks
Some
and I'll
poop,
send
some
you
poop bookmarks. So
some.
good,
Coop the
His
poop.
name's
He's got a name. That's Coop the
Yeah, it's
poop.
Coop the Poop. Yep.
so good, so good.
Oh, that's so funny.
My
Uh,
kids run around yelling "coop!" like
oh,
we
that's
gotta
so
coop the poop
good.
pooper. Yeah.
I'm just curious, how old are your kiddos?
We have twin 7-year-olds and a 5-year-old.
Okay. Oh, so very, very similar. I got a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I was actually just I did a little post earlier. I chaperoned my third graders, my daughter's field trip yesterday, and I was taking a span of first graders, second graders, and third graders all to the zoo. And I got home yesterday and I was exhausted. Like I was so worn out. Like my wife was laughing at me. I literally walked in the door, dropped off the bags, and like went straight to my room. I was like, I'm done. I need a nap. And I was exhausted. I was like, oh man, this is what parents or this is what teachers have to deal with every single day. Like, oh, thank you. Thank you, teachers. But yeah. So hey, last question. I know we gotta wrap it up soon. We asked this inside of our mastermind, and it's just basically like defining what success looks like, right? Defining what success looks like as a parent, as in your family role, in your health, in your finances, and defining it, and really defining what success looks like. If I ask you that question, what does success look like to you as a parent?
That my children grow up into well-adjusted adults who are in careers that they absolutely love, that they chose themselves, and they are married happily, and they have children who they are training to or raising to be well-adjusted adults, and they're active community members.
Done.
Love
Sounds
it.
Mm-hmm.
awesome.
Yeah.
I think what I love about that is you've defined a future that you can discuss with them, and
Mm-hmm.
none of it is controlling. It's all it's in your aspirations for them and their well-being. And
Mm-hmm.
has nothing to do with I mean, obviously it would make you very proud and happy to have that,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not a control. I love that. uh, Before we wrap up, I just want to thank you so much, not only for your time and joining us, but what you do, the work you do, not only for the children that you help, but for the parents that you help as well. Like this conversation has been, I mean, I've got notes and action items that I can take home and do, and simple things, but intentionality that really can set the tone for success for my kids, right? And for the future
Mm-hmm.
generations. And ideally it gets passed on and passed on because they had a dad who invested and loved them and
Mm-hmm.
set and a mom who invested and loved them and set an example of what a healthy family could look like and feel like, because there's so many other factors just impacting them, and you're on the front lines of that. You have gotten direct feedback, obviously, from people that you are the most influential person in life, which is absolutely incredible. But there are people that you're not going to hear from that read your book. There are people that you're not going to hear from that, even generations from now that
Mm-hmm.
that you're impacting and you're planting seeds. So thank you for the work you do. Is truly God's work, and it's an amazing, amazing thing. And just I'm very grateful there are people like you out there that are so focused on helping others and really changing people's lives. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Andrea, where do we send people to find out more about everything that you're doing? You had mentioned just getting the book on Amazon, but I know you have a website, and where do we send people?
Brightspotfamilies.com.
Okay, brightspotfamilies.com. We'll put that in the show notes. Um, Guys and gals, read this book. It's fantastic. I laughed. I cried. I talked about it with my wife. We're changing our own parental habits because of it. It's fantastic. Um, Andrea has an amazing TEDx talk. We'll put that also in the show notes for a link there. Go watch that, listen to it. Very, very impactful. Appreciate everything you do, like David said. Guys and gals, hey, let's go make a change. Let's go be the best husbands and fathers, uh, wives, mothers. Like, let's go. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Andrea.
And important note, if you know Stu personally, do not borrow that book because he admitted he took it, went poopy with it. So don't
True
borrow that
statement.
book from him.
True statement.
And that's how we end the show.
Bye now. Hey, for those of you who've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know that Dave and myself transitioned out of a 20-year career in the military, in the Navy. And there were some really big struggles in that. And I'd say that for anybody that's in a transition of changing an identity can have a really, really hard time finding a new identity and going through the struggles of figuring out what's next.
We talk a lot about purpose. We talk a lot about tribe and community. We talk a lot about mission. And those aspects of a transition are really hard to figure out. So you need a community. You need a tribe. You need to have someone in your life that's going to hold you accountable and help you grow into this new identity. That's what we do in the Kinetic Man. We have a lot of military veterans in our space that we talk through on a daily and monthly basis of how to figure out what's next, how to figure out how to continue to live with purpose, live with mission, and be incredible husbands, incredible fathers, incredible leaders in the community, and incredible businessmen. We have a ton of entrepreneurs. We have guys doing deals together, investing with each other, and growing with each other to be the best men that they can possibly be so they can show up every single day for their families and for their businesses. If that's something that sounds interesting, come join us. You can go to thekineticman.com/signup, thekineticman.com/signup, and come grow with us. See you.
Thank you for listening to the Kinetic Man podcast. If you are growth-minded, community-focused, and willing to take uncommon action to redefine success and live an abundant life, visit our website at www.thekineticman.com to see all the ways we can connect.
And on our website, you can find more information on everything we're doing, like joining our meetup page to get the details on our webinars and our local Thursday gatherings here in Colorado. From our site, you can also find more information on and sign up for the next Kinetic Man retreat and the next house of our mastermind group. Finally, we always appreciate your love and support. Please share this episode and go rate us on your favorite podcast player of choice.
Thank you again. Now go take uncommon action.